In this video, I'm going to give you 8 tips to save fuel while driving. If combined, these tips can save you well over 20% on your fuel. Now, of course, one of the most fuel efficient things you could do is switch to something like an electric vehicle or a hybrid vehicle, but I know for a lot of people, including myself, that this isn't something that's always possible. So in this video, I'm going to give you science-based tips that you could use to save fuel, as well as an estimate of how much each tip can save you. Now, be sure to stick around to the end of the video where I'm going to go over some tips that I really don't think are all that helpful, or in some cases not even true. If you want to get more tips about how to live a more sustainable life, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. The first tip to save gas while driving is to keep your tires properly inflated. According to one study, it's estimated that regular tire pressure checks could reduce petroleum consumption by over 1 billion gallons per year and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 13.5 million tons. In that same study, they found that only about 30% of people check their tire pressure once per month, and it's fairly common for people to have a tire that is at least 25% below what it should be. For every 1 drop in PSI, your fuel efficiency drops by about 0.2%. So for many people, that's about 1.5%, and others estimate this could be as much as 8%. Tip 2 is to use proper motor oil. One study found that in the vehicles they tested, they were able to improve the fuel efficiency by 1.5% just by using the proper motor oil. Tip 3 is to keep your car in tune. A good tune-up could save you about 4% on your fuel economy. If you don't already know, a tune-up is basically where your car will go through a series of maintenance procedures to help it get its best performance and extend its life. It may consist of changing out spark plugs, filters, and so on. This one is more for people who drive a lot or that have older cars. Older cars will need to be tuned up more often, for example, every year or every 10,000 miles, whereas newer cars could probably go several years without needing a major tune-up. Tip 4 is to watch your speed. Now, you would think that this means not driving too quickly, but it also means not driving too slow. A lot of people like to recommend that you drive as slow as possible. The reason they recommend this is that the faster you go, the more you have to push against air, making it harder and harder to go faster. So by driving slower, you don't need as much power or as much fuel to push the air out of the way as the car moves. However, at low speeds, the engine is working harder than you're allowing it to work. You are essentially not allowing the engine to give you its full power, which also wastes fuel. It's sort of like when you ride a bike in the wrong gear and you pedal really fast but don't go anywhere. So your car is actually most efficient where these two things balance out, meaning not too fast to avoid a lot of air resistance and not too slow so the engine isn't working harder than it has to. The exact speed where these two things balance out is different in every car, but there's usually one shift somewhere around 30 miles per hour and another one somewhere around 55 miles per hour as the car moves into different gears. So when you can drive slower, aim for the 25 to 30 mile per hour range, and when you can drive faster, aim for the 50 to 55 mile per hour range. It's estimated that most people probably have about 5 to 10 miles per hour that they could slow down, and this would be about 7 to 14% fuel savings. Tip number 5 is to be mindful when driving. In addition to the previous tip at driving at the right speeds, you also want to avoid accelerating too quickly and deaccelerating too quickly. One study found that simply being mindful of fuel economy by doing things like not accelerating too quickly could save you around 4% of your fuel efficiency. However, if you have a feedback sensor on your car, as many of them do these days, you can save somewhere around 18 to 22%. It's estimated that the average person will save about 10% just by practicing these techniques. So far in total, that's 1% from keeping your tires inflated properly, 1.5% from using proper motor oil, about 4% from a good engine tune-up, 10% from driving at the right speeds, and about another 10% by driving mindfully. Now, all of these tips are free or at least part of regular vehicle maintenance and can save you well over 20% of your fuel economy. If you're liking these tips so far and you want to keep getting similar tips, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. If you're okay spending a little bit of money, for about $50 to a few $100, you could start to make really big impacts on your fuel economy. One study found that if you have a start-stop system on your car, or you're able to install one for a couple $100, you could save about 8% on fuel economy. Engine downsizing in one study was estimated to cost about $500 and would reduce fuel consumption by about 6 to 14%. And last, according to the same study, for about $50 to $100, you can save about 10% of fuel by installing a fuel cut system. Now, I'm going to give you 3 popular tips that a lot of people like to recommend that I really don't think are all that helpful for most people, and in some cases not even true. The first of these popular tips that a lot of people like to recommend is that you don't carry a lot of weight around in the car with you. Reducing the weight of your car by 100 pounds will save you about 1% of your fuel economy. And while this is a great tip, most people don't have a spare 100 pounds lying around in their car that they could go ahead and just remove. Relying on tips like this is not going to be helpful for most people and distracts from tips that are actually helpful. To give you an idea of what 100 pounds looks like, this is 100 pounds. On a related note, people like to recommend that you only fill your gas tank about halfway to cut down on the amount of weight that you need to carry around. Gasoline weighs about 6 pounds per gallon, and the average car can hold about 15 gallons, which in total makes about 90 pounds. Looking back at the previous tip, we know that 90 pounds or roughly 100 pounds would save you 1% of your fuel economy. So if you only fill your car up about halfway, that's about 0.5% on your fuel economy, which again sounds like a great tip, but ignores the fact that you would have to drive to the gas station more frequently. And if you go through the math, it actually turns out that you would use more fuel having to drive to the gas station more often. If you live just 1 mile from a gas station and have to make a 2-mile round trip and get 25 miles per gallon the entire way, you'll still end up using more fuel this way. The only real way that this tip would work would be if you were able to stop and get fuel on your way somewhere and you didn't really need to do any extra driving to get to the gas station. And the final tip is to not keep anything on your roof. Most people are not carrying around something on their roof very often, and so this tip isn't going to be helpful to most people. And if you do have something on your roof, it might be just to transport it to and from wherever you bought it from or something like that. It's not something that you're going to do very frequently. For example, if you look at this clip of a busy highway, you can see that most passenger cars don't have anything on their roof. Just about 4 cars or 4% of the cars that I looked at had anything on their roof. So what do you do to save fuel when driving? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Go Green Post. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.